London City Airport. It is today, but it's a few hours ago. So at the moment it's just after 7:30 in the evening. In sim time it's about 2:30, I think. Let's just check. Oh no, I'm wrong. It had gone to default time. Okay, sorry, let's just do that. Here you can see Wideview makes the client machine reload at the same time, because the date and time has changed, so it needs to reload some of the textures. There you go. Right, so it is today, but it's about an hour ago, so I've set it back about an hour, so it doesn't get dark too early. And this is the real world weather as well, courtesy of SPAD.Next. So this is the weather that we're having in London today, which is actually not too bad compared to a couple of days ago. It's going to be better tomorrow, I believe, sunny tomorrow, but today it's a bit cloudy. We had some rain this morning, but right now it's decent weather for flying. We're in, as I mentioned, Embraer's Phenom 100. It's a very light jet. It is, I suppose it's like a big GA aircraft in some ways. Only carries a maximum of 6 people, including the pilot and the co-pilot. And it is capable of decent performance, but not so much faster than, say, the TBM. That there's one advantage to flying that over the other. The only reason I'm not flying the TBM is because this is newer, more interesting, and also it's a jet aircraft, so I get to use my my jet thrust levers properly, which I haven't done for a while. Other than that, and the fact we're using PF3 for the ATC, pretty much everything is as it was in the last video. I have installed Navigraph charts over here on my iPad Pro. I've got a Navigraph subscription which I use to update the FMS data in the simulator and other tools. And one benefit of that is I can use all the charts, and that is pretty handy for seeing SIDS and stars and other things like that. But for most of the time we're going to be using SkyDemon just to track where we are. So I tell SkyDemon to go flying, I tell it to look for X-plane, it finds X-plane, courtesy of FSX to SkyDemon, and here we are on the ground, albeit pointing in the wrong direction. That seems to be an initialization issue. Alright then, let's get on with it. So, power to the aircraft first. Now, first thing I shall do...
Terrain, system test, OK. TOS, system test, OK.
Other than have to listen to the warning messages, we'll get a bunch of beeps as well, like bell sounds. It's all part of the startup. So I've just switched over to the ground power unit, because the batteries on this thing do not last forever. But they don't last that long at all. There's the beeps. Good, okay, avionics master on. You can probably see that it's saying Cirrus Perspective. That's because Flight 1 Text G1000 doesn't have anything close to the Phenom in its database. Only has a very few aircraft. Flight 1 does do a Mustang trainer, so it does have jet capability for the software, but it only sells it as a turnkey kit with hardware. It doesn't sell that one as a separate plug-in. I'm hoping maybe they will one day, but until they do, then the Flight 1 has no jet aircraft. So I use the Cirrus SR22 as a base, just because the Cirrus version of the G1000 looks more like what you'd see in the real aircraft, although the G1000 in the Phenom is quite heavily customized, and it's actually been customized by Prodigy, so it's the Garmin Prodigy G1000. But it's good enough for non-technical users, as they say. And I've set all the right V-speeds, etc., so we get the right markers on the tape and that sort of thing. So just say OK to dismiss that. Down here on the screen, which you may just be able to see, but probably not, maybe yes on the GoPro, we have the Carenado G1000 MFD, And the reason I have that down here is because I need the engine display. So rather like with the TBM 850 where I actually stripped out the engine display from the MFD gauge, I need the engine display here. But there's also a few other bits and pieces on their MFD which is useful, in particular, and that's the wrong keyboard, in particular, I'll just set it up now. They have a weather radar, which of course the real aircraft does have, but the Flight 1 Tech G1000 does not implement. So now I've got basically an engine display and a weather radar down here, and that's pretty much all I use that for. I'll just leave that there, and it's quite handy for seeing what's going on. But the rest of the time I'll use the Flight 1 Tech G1000. Just ignore this engine panel; it is meaningless since this is a twin jet aircraft, and that is for a single piston engine. But everything else that you see on the G1000 is good. Okay, so we got power to the aircraft. Let's get the panel light on because it's a little bit dim in here. Panel light will auto switch eventually once I got around to programming it. I just haven't worked out how to program the relay card that I built recently. It's eminently doable. It's just a case of finding the time. So in the meantime, I'm just using a lap to do it. Okay, so we've got those lights, and now we can talk on the radio. So let's get PF3 loaded up. So that's flight plan. Yes, thank you for reminding me. For EGLC EHAM 01. Load that flight plan to PF3 and say connect to FS. Okay, so PF3 is now active. So first of all, you are required to get the ATIS. It does make you do that. I haven't done that, so 136.35. So let's get the ATIS.
London City Airport information. Romeo, weather at 1745 Zulu, winds 303 at 7, visibility greater than 20 miles. The condition 4,000, broken 27,100, broken temperature 20, dew point 11, altimeter 1017, ILS runway 27 in use. Landing departing runway 27, VFR aircraft say direction of flight. All aircraft read back hold short instructions. Advise controller on initial contact. You have Romeo.
We have Romeo.
London City Airport.
See, I knew it would repeat again. So that's PF3's ATIS. It's not bad. You will have heard that the voice was a bit more appropriate for the region. So although it seemed to have a bit of an accent, I think it was a British voice. They have many different regional accents in PF3, and I think they're assigned geographically, but there's also a degree of randomness in there as well, so you will occasionally hear an American controller in British airspace. I guess that represents the fact that you might actually have an American doing ATC in the UK, so I don't worry overly about that, and if I care, I can tweak all those settings. By the way, this will probably be a multi-part video, certainly 2 parts at least. It's a reasonably long flight. In previous videos I've kind of taken to jumping ahead and cutting and cutting and cutting to try and get it down to maybe 30 minutes max. But with all the ground, all the spiel up front and the time spent on getting set up on the ground, 30 minutes would compress the actual flying time probably down to about 5 minutes, which is a bit pointless. So instead I'm going to do it as a multi-part video. I still may cut out some of the boring bits, obviously. There's no point in you seeing the entire crossing of the sea if there's nothing going to happen other than cruising at altitude, watching the clouds. So I mean, I might do a kind of a director's cut, absolutely full raw video at some point, but probably not for YouTube. And I'm not really sure if anybody gets anything out of that kind of content anyway. So I guess we'll find out. All right, so we have our ATIS. Now we need to get our clearance. Now, unlike the built-in ATC, PF3 does not generally prompt you with frequencies. So unless you hear the frequency when it's announced to you, you can miss what you're doing. There are a couple of ways around that, but this P3 displayer program will actually give me a list of the departure frequencies that I need. So ATIS there was 163.35. There's no clearance separately, there's no ground separately, there's just the tower, and then there's the departure and the FSS. I think that's actually pretty much real to life. I'm fairly sure at London City there aren't separate ground and tower functions. It's a small airport and the tower can see everything that's going on, so I dare say they don't need them. So we're going to get our clearance, our IFR clearance from the tower on 118.07, so let's tune that in. At some point I will turn on the virtual copilot mode. It was 07, wasn't it? The virtual copilot mode, virtual copilot mode assigns, as you switch up the mode, a progressively larger number of functions across your virtual copilot. In theory, it can go all the way to flying the aircraft. In reality, the way that they fly the aircraft isn't really compatible with something like a G1000 system, but you certainly can assign all of the radio comms to the copilot, and at some point I will do that. So the copilot will switch the frequencies, will check in with control, will respond to messages, and then I've just got to action the stuff that's coming in. And on approach, when there's a lot of stuff going on, that's actually pretty handy. I guess it's slightly cheating. This aircraft is built for single pilot operation, and it is rated for it, but you know, every little helps. Let's get our clearance from control, so go to 118.075. This display here, you'll see, there you go, pops up with all the options that I now have. So interestingly, the keys have disappeared. Why have the keys disappeared? Alright, let's reload that. Yeah, there you go. I think I managed to accidentally get rid of the key column, which is bad because then I can't see which key I'm pressing. So check-in is always 0, but there you go. Sim has to be in focus for this to work. Press 0 and away we go.
Tower. Golf Bravo Bravo Papa 01 IFR 2 Echo Hotel Alpha Mike with information Romeo.
Golf Bravo Bravo Papa 01 clear to Echo Hotel Alpha Mike runway heading departure maintain light level 14 fiddle expect light level 33 fiddle 10 minutes after departure. Squawk 3267 departure 123.6.
Read that back.
Runway heading maintain light level 140 light level 330 intent squawk 3267 departure 123.6. Golf Bravo Bravo Papa 01.
Okay, so we've got a clearance.
Golf Bravo Bravo Papa 01 read correct.
And I set the initial altitude at 14,000. I put my transponder code in there as he gave it to me, and I've put the frequency for departure into COM2, which we can use on the way up. Okay, at this point we need to get our engines on, ready to taxi. So that's actually pretty straightforward in this aircraft. Has a FADEC system, so that's digital control for the engine, so you don't have to do quite as much manual jiggery pokery as you maybe would do with some other aircraft. I'm just setting the pressurization switches and then set the ignition switches to auto. Everything else is good by default, so we start the left engine. I'll watch the M1 go up. Unfortunately you can't see this, but when it hits 10 we'll get fuel injection and the engine should start. So here we go, 7, 8, 9, fuel injection, and there it goes. Must apologise for being slightly snotty, by the way. got a bit of hay fever going on at the moment. Odd, really, given the time of the summer, but I seem to be allergic to a lot of pollen. So I get hay fever most of the year. Today, for whatever reason, it's a little bit bad. Okay, we can start engine 2. Again, watch the M1. And the M2, and the pressure's not good there. 7, 8, 9. There we go. Okay, engine 2 is starting. Okay, good start. Turn on the panel lights. And then, unfortunately, because neither the aircraft power status nor some of the lights gets carried over properly by Wideview, I then need to actually power up this aircraft, image generator aircraft, separately. And I also need to activate these light switches manually. But that's done now. Okay, so we have a good engine start. Lights are on. Everything else looks good. So we are ready to ask for our taxi. So again, 0 on the keypad.
Tower. Bravo, Bravo, Papa 01, ready to taxi.
Golf, Bravo, Bravo, Papa 01, stand by. Stand by.
Nice to get to stand by.
Golf, Bravo, Bravo, Papa 01, taxi, runway 27.
Roger, taxi to holding point, runway 27. Golf, Bravo, Bravo, Papa 01.
Okay, we've got a taxi clearance. Not exactly a complicated airport, sorry, to taxi around this one. So let's have nav lights on, taxi lights on, pitot heat on. That's good. Parking brake goes off. Right, to get rolling, you need to apply a decent amount of thrust just to overcome the inertia of the aircraft. And then once it's rolling, you don't need much to keep it going. We'll try and get our taxi speed around about 15 knots, which would be about right for the prevailing conditions. So here we go. Advance the throttles. Start to move. Throttles back. You'll notice it's slightly choppy in terms of the graphics. I've actually had to turn the scenery down to sparse because this is London, and London, I'm afraid, is the frame rate killer. I will, during the flight, turn it back up to normal, so when we get towards Amsterdam we'll see a bit more scenery. But if I had this on normal here, with one machine generating 2 outside views, it would be very stuttery. Give it a little bit more throttle. Power, I shouldn't say throttle. A little bit more power. So runway 27 is the far end, and for that you need to roll down the apron here. And then onto the runway, and then backtrack down the runway to the end where there's actually, well, there's a turning circle, but there's also a holding loop. And when the runway was extended here in the early 1990s, they added extra length of runway and this holding loop, so they can hold 2 or 3 aircraft out there ready to go whilst other aircraft come in, and that made life a lot easier in terms of fitting more traffic in. But you can see where the original turning circle was, because you passed through it on your way. Okay. Probably about as fast as we want to go. So we get a little bit slippery. When I'm turning, the wing is coming off the ground. Sorry, I mean the wing's raising up. Alright for me, but you wouldn't want to do that in a 737 because the passengers will be upset. This is UK 2000's London City. I think I've mentioned this before. I think I've flown out of London City before on the channel. It's really my favourite airport in the world, and I mean that in the real world. Fantastically convenient, near to where I live, which is good. But you know, it's so small, you can get from the entrance to any gate in 10 minutes walking time. Up until really the 9/11. Here's the original turning circle, by the way. Up until sort of the 9/11 era, you used to be able to check in 15 minutes before departure. Now with the slightly enhanced security theatre, I think the minimum time is usually 30 minutes. Well, you might be able to do 15 minutes if you only have hand baggage, I'm not sure. But certainly you can check in a lot closer to departure than you can do in a lot of airports, and more importantly, you'll have a decent chance of actually making it to the gate on time because it's not very far. No worrying about which terminal you're going to be at, or taking trains between terminals. There is just the one terminal. There's 15 gates. No jetways. It's all come out on the ramp and go upstairs. There's some birds. All of UK 2000's airports have a little flock of birds circling around. I think it's a bit of a trademark of theirs. And here we are, ready for runway 27. Rather bizarrely, one of the things you lose in going from normal to sparse is some of the runway markings, so the actual runway threshold marking. I really don't see why, because surely that doesn't add, it's just a texture. Shouldn't add any overhead, but there you go. So that's why there isn't one, if you're wondering where it is. Okay, taxi complete. Well, there's no, we're already on tower because there's no separate ground, so we can ask the tower to let us go. And for that, I just press number 6.
Tower. Bravo, Bravo, Papa 01, runway 27, ready for departure.
Call from Papa 01, Webs 3, settle, I7, runway 27, clear for takeoff, Y runway heading.
Roger, cleared for takeoff, runway heading. Bravo, Bravo, Papa 01.
Flaps 1 for takeoff. Flaps 1, that is, not flaps 2, thank you. Now, it's a short runway. It is long enough, just. But I'm going to do a power up on the brakes first and then go. Our rotation speed is 104 knots with flaps 1. I think with flaps 2 you can get down to about 100 knots, but nothing lower than that. And everything else looks good. So Taxi lights go off, strobe lights go on. Everything else is great, so let's go. Deploying toga power. Watch the engines come to 100%. Engines are at 100%. Let's go. Speeds alive, 60 knots, 70 knots, 80 knots, 90 knots, 100 knots, rotate. And we're up. Positive rate of climb, gear up. Flying runway heading.
Call out from Park 01, contact departure on 123.6.
123.6. Bravo, Papa 01, good day.
Okay, over to COM 2 and check in.
Departure. Bravo, Papa 01, out of 1,500 for flight level 140.
Bravo, Papa 01, radar contact, unit H1017.
Just the barrow a little bit there. Let's bring the nose down slightly. Start speeding up a little bit.
Go Bravo, Papa 01, turn right heading 350.
Right 2350. Bravo, Papa 01. Right 2350. Bravo, Papa 01.
That double confirm was my fault. I basically
Go
pressed the
Bravo,
button twice.
Papa 01, no speed restriction.
Flaps can come up now.
Bravo, Papa 01, turn right heading 030.
Right 2030, no speed restriction. Bravo, Papa 01. Right 2030. Bravo, Papa 01.
Same thing again. I may explain why that happens later on when I'm slightly less busy. Okay,
Go Bravo, Papa 01, GMA navigation.
Roger, human navigation. Bravo,
Alright,
Bravo,
so
Papa
at this
01.
point, autopilot goes on. Set heading, and then when I get down to 180 knots, just slowing down a little bit now, I'm going to engage flight level change mode.
Papa 01, contacts under control on 126.85.
126.85. Bravo, Papa 01, good day.
Okay, I'll just engage flight level change mode. Now there's a perfect example of how I immediately forgot that frequency, so I'm going to have to ask him to tell me again.
Go Bravo, Papa 01, contacts under control on 126.85.
Right, there we go.
126.85. Bravo, Papa 01, good day. Bravo, Papa 01, say again.
Okay, radio comms have got a bit confused.
Contacts under control on 126.85.
126.85. Bravo, Papa 01, good day.
I definitely will talk about that in a minute. Okay, I'm just coming right to get back onto my track. and then when that happens, the autopilot will resume course following automatically. Right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to enable virtual copilot in Com Plus mode. So now the virtual copilot will handle all of my frequency changes. It is slightly lazy of me, but it avoids situations like that. Now, the reason why PR3 gets out of sync is because it's not quite real time. And what I mean by that is that it stores up events and it plays them at the right time. So for example, with a built-in ATC, if someone's talking to you and you hit the button to reply whilst they're still talking to you, you get a squelch because you stepped over them. In PR3 you don't get that. Instead, PR3 waits until after the other party's finished speaking, and then it does what you asked it to do. What that means is that if you hit the readback key on an instruction where it's not expecting a readback, then it will remember that, and the next time that there is a message that you can read back to, it will then do that readback straight away, which is why I ended up with double readbacks there, because I was pressing the readback key but there was already kind of a readback stored in the buffer. Now, I find it intensely annoying, and I wish it wouldn't do it, but there doesn't seem to be a lot I can do about it. Okay, we're back on GPS mode now, so we're following our course. And I'm on cruise power. Could probably do with picking up a few more knots, but nothing major. As you're probably just about to see, there's the coastline. So we're about to head out over the sea. And about half this journey is done over the sea. Well, I say about, we're actually quite some distance away, but we're also quite high up, so we can see it. Yes, that, and the other annoying thing about PR3 is there's no easy way to know whether or not the controller's expecting a reply, because it doesn't indicate anywhere that a readback is expected. You just have to know. And I'm still learning which ones do require a reply and which ones don't. Hence you end up with the doubling up like we have there. Also, another problem I've seen with PR3 is that you'll switch to the departure frequency and it will start talking to you as if you'd already checked in with them even before you've done it. And so, you know, I've pressed the check-in key, they're talking to me already, so then they talk to me, and then I check in, and then they say the same thing back to me again. And I think that's a bug. It doesn't appear to be anything I'm doing out of sequence. Okay, I'm expecting to get given a slightly higher altitude than that. We are supposed to be cruising at 33,000. But we do tend to get a bit of a step climb here. In fact, going to 14,000 straight off the bat is pretty good. I normally only get up to about 5,000 or 6,000 feet, and then they step climb me bit by bit to my final altitude. Now this is a short enough flight that 33,000 feet is probably slightly overkill, but I think the airways I'm using aren't supposed to be used less than a certain altitude, and so I could, for example, go at 15 or 18,000, something like that. But it does mean I'll probably, unless I get my climb pretty quickly, I probably won't have climbed to my final cruise altitude before I start getting descent instructions. Exactly how real world that is, I don't know. Anyway, here we are up in the clouds, courtesy of Active SkyNext.
Climb MST, 57310, Turkish 1970.
So, sim time, it is 7:15. Real time, it's 8:15. So you've got this kind of dusky effect on the clouds, where the sun is setting. Looks like it's setting. Well, it's setting in the west. The west is that way, so it's setting behind me. by the time we get to Schipol, it will be getting on for dusk, and we'll have all the nice runway lighting and evening lighting effects. Also, my Netherlands scenery is ORBX's EU True Earth Netherlands, which is the latest version they've just released, and it has their new True Earth tech in it. True Earth basically combines aerial photography, and it is genuine aerial photography, not satellite photography, of the whole of the Netherlands, with hand-placed buildings and autogen intended to give you realistic building coverage. Now, you know, they say in theory every building that's really there in the Netherlands is really there in the scenery. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The trouble is, to experience that, you'd have to have your scenery on extremely dense or ultra dense, whatever the highest setting is now, and you'd have to have your autogen turned up to the max. And I don't know anybody that has a PC that would let them do that. At least, you know, not if you want frames more than sort of 10 or 15 per second. Having said that, it's definitely not a super frame rate hog. So, although I've got the settings on sparse at the moment, I will dial them up to normal at some point during this flight, so that when we get there we'll be on normal density. So what you'll see is you've got clusters of buildings with gaps in between, so the autogen in particular will not be anywhere near as dense as maybe it might be, but that still means there are hundreds and hundreds of buildings down there, many, many more than you would see in the standard scenery package, and they seem to be doing that without any significant FPS or CPU hit. So I'm quite hopeful that when the EU England True Earth scenery package comes out, and it could be a while because it's coming out for X-Plane first, that they might be able to solve the London problem and give you many more hand-placed buildings to give you the real effects of an urban area, but without the frame rate hit that you have at the moment. Although I think London will always be a frame rate hog just because of the terrain area and the fact there's so many airports in the near vicinity, so that, you know, unless you tune your level of detail right down, you're getting a lot of stuff loaded and in the pipeline for rendering, even though, you know, you may not be going anywhere near Heathrow. It's still all being rendered and built for you. Before this flight, I actually did go in and turn off UK 2000's Heathrow, since I knew we wouldn't be going anywhere near it, and see if it helped, and actually it doesn't. It really doesn't, which was disappointing. But there you go. But I think I shall dial the scenery up now.
Bravo, Bravo, Papa 01 has the traffic.
Right, 266 traffic at 8 o'clock, 651, 4
So banging up to normal.
Has the traffic, Ryanair 8266.
So you'll notice there that the co-pilot answered that call automatically by saying thank you for the advisory, or possibly, yeah, I do have the traffic in sight, so he will probably have said have the traffic in sight. Normally he just says thank you because we don't have it in sight, but there it is, look, right there. Okay, scenery is up to normal. Seem to have, by reloading, we seem to have added a few taller clouds, so we might pass through some cloud tops. Okay, I seem to have lost my PR3 options, so I'm just gonna oh, this happened before. Yes, this did happen before.
Golf Bravo Bravo Papa 01 climb and maintain flight level 200.
Auto light level 140 or light level 200. Bravo Bravo Papa 01. Auto light level 140 or light level 200. Bravo Bravo Papa 01.
Okay, there you go, same problem again. I answered that call myself without thinking.
Golf Bravo Bravo Papa 01 contact London control on 132.25.
132.25. Bravo Bravo Papa 01. Good day.